Hello everyone, my name is Mory. I am an independent researcher and activist. I have a decade of experience working on youth and community engagement, human rights, and environmental rights advocacy.
Hi everyone, my name is Dustin Barter and I am a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge and have worked in the aid sector for more than a decade in a bunch of different countries, including Cambodia. Today, we are going to talk about contesting hydropower hegemony, civil society resistance in Cambodia. Here is a brief overview of the presentation that Mory and I will be co-presenting. We just thought we'd start off with this photo of some neighbors playing chess, just to kind of visually represent some of the themes we'll be exploring, particularly around civil society contestation and hegemony, where there's moves and counter moves and different ways to take action, which is much of what we will be exploring throughout the rest of the presentation.
Cambodia is the country in Southeast Asian region, which is enriched of cultural heritage and natural resources such as forest, river, and mineral. Cambodia went through nearly 3 decades of civil war from the 1970 to the late 1980. However, the natural resources were well preserved and it provided a very significant source of the food production in Cambodia. After the Paris Peace Agreement in 1991, Cambodia organized its first national election in 1993 under the support from United Nations, created a new constitution, changed the economic system from the planned economy to free market. As a post-conflict society, many international organizations and NGOs came in and opened office in Cambodia, work on various sectors such as development issue, humanitarian response, environment, human rights, rule of law, and democracy. If we look at the economic sector, in the past decade, it reported that Cambodia experienced rapid economic progress with the growth rate between 6 to 7% annually. At the same time, it has seen that the natural resources has been extracted and exploited in order to sustain the economic growth and development. Unfortunately, the natural resources has been extracted, used, and developed without transparency due to the weak law enforcement, poor natural resource governance, and the systematic corruption under the same ruling party for more than 30 years. Currently, the deforestation, land grabbing, extractive industry, hydropower dam has become the main issue in the development agenda in Cambodia.
The theoretical framing of our presentation has three key pillars. Firstly, political ecology, where we are intentionally trying to go beyond a political economy analysis to also bring in aspects around ecology, culture, and spiritual connection to land, because we believe this is really important as it influences the way different actors contest hydropower hegemony, and also is really important for the rationalities behind different actions, particularly when we're looking at perhaps some of the indigenous groups that are impacted by hydropower hegemony in Cambodia. The second key pillar is looking at Gramsci's theory of hegemony, where we are looking at traditional kind of Gramscian theory around ideological contestation, but also looking at counter hegemony and how to challenge such a powerful force as hydropower hegemony. The third pillar, which has maybe two key aspects, is one, looking at civil society as this kind of spatial concept, where it is a space for contesting hegemony and also intersects with political society as well. And then the other aspect of who constitutes civil society. So the UN definition looks specifically at non-government organizations, NGOs, and formal civil society organizations. We find this definition a bit restrictive because it excludes a lot of informal actors. Therefore, we take on the civicus definition of civil society, which is basically the sector outside of the family, the private sector, and the state. And this allows for a much broader, inclusive civil society definition of both formal and informal actors. Finally, also looking at civil society, there's a deep body of literature looking at the evolution of civil society post-war or from the early 1990s. And a lot of this theory really looks at the influence of international actors down onto Cambodian civil society and is very critical of civil society for being overly NGOized, technocratic, and subservient to international agendas. What we want to show in some of this analysis is that while some of these criticisms have validity, there's also a much richer depth to Cambodian civil society than captured in the literature, and also a much more confrontational, dynamic, fluid, informal civil society than a lot of the existing literature captures. Before Mory presents about our two case studies, I just want to give a brief overview of this concept of hydropower hegemony. So it's really centered on this idea of modernization and development of Cambodia for the sake of poverty alleviation and economic development. This is common not just in Cambodia, but also in Laos, wanting to be the battery of Asia, as well as many other countries throughout the world. So what this does is it's a very powerful ideological tool because it marginalizes any alternative epistemologies or other values towards river systems. And so if you become anti-dam or anti-hydropower, you're basically seen as anti-poverty alleviation, anti-development. So it really marginalizes these kind of alternative views of the world. Hydropower hegemony is further supported by China's Belt and Road Initiative, which provides extensive political and financial capital towards the expansion of hydropower throughout Cambodia, but also the region and globally. Going on from some of James Scott's work as well, if you look at hydropower hegemony, a lot of these dams are located in remote, rural, and often indigenous areas. So by creating a seemingly or somewhat benign hydropower dam, you're also actually extending state power into that area. This is particularly acute when you see cases of mass displacement and resettlement of communities from subsistence, riverine lifestyles into this kind of resettlement villages where everybody is living in houses that are distinct rows and come into a much more formalized governance structure, and also into a global economy where you see people changing often from subsistence and quite rich in many ways lifestyles to becoming involved in cash crops and other aspects. So hydropower hegemony really pushes all of these different factors. Finally, the sustainability and green agendas that are increasingly common are not that prevalent in Cambodia to justify hydropower, but as we see the push of the SDGs and other aspects, it's quite possible that green power and this idea of sustainability will try to strengthen this hydropower hegemony. So to be against dams, you'd be against sustainability. But that is something that is emerging in some countries, but not so much in Cambodia yet.
My presentation today will demonstrate how the confrontational and less confrontational advocacy approach impacted the result of the campaign opposing the two dam project in Cambodia as a case study. First, I would like to start with the case study of Lower Sisantu Dam. Lower Sisantu was the first large-scale dam project in Cambodia and create huge social and environmental impact, including the indigenous people and Lao minority. Given the fact that the impacted community were not fully informed and engaged in the consultation process. For this reason, the villagers were less involved in the advocacy campaign to oppose the dam project at the early stage because they don't have sufficient information. However, among the impacted village, we saw that only the community from Sreko and Kabarumis commune were better organized and mobilized to join the advocacy campaign. Unfortunately, the community movement and advocacy against the dam project was not success due to different factors. First and foremost, the project was officially approved by the National Assembly and was being constructed before the advocacy of the community and NGO exists. And I can say the campaign against the dam project started too late and was not proactive at all. Second, community members were not well organized and empowered enough, and they performed less confrontational approach opposing the dam. For instance, they just conduct press conference, they just organize workshop and deliver petition to relevant authority. Third, I have noticed that the community from Lower Sisantu were more diverse and were divided. For those who are not belong to Bunong indigenous community and Lao minority, they decide to accept the compensation at the early stage because they don't have memory and connection to their ancestral land, river, and natural resources. For the civil society actor involvement, I saw there were different stands among the NGO who are working in Lower Sisantu. Some NGO supported the community to oppose the dam project, but many other talked to the people to sing about the compensation because they did not believe that the campaign can stop the dam project. Last but not least, Lower Sisantu create huge social environmental impact both a local community at the downstream and the upstream. However, the dam campaign received less attention from the general public and has no influence on the government decision because the campaign was not spread wider both on social media and the media outlet. For the For the second case study, I will draw your attention to the campaign opposing the dam project in Arang Valley. Different from the case of Lower Sisantu Dam, the community, environmental activists, grassroots NGO experienced their first successful campaign against the dam project. It had various factors that can stop the dam project in Arang. First, impacted community members in Arang were more united, took more risks, and performed confrontational advocacy strategy to oppose the dam project, especially the roadblock for 6 months to prevent the company representative to conduct the final study and bring the excavator and material of the dam, the material for building the dam into the dam site. Second, the campaign wider cover by national and international media outlet because of the creative advocacy strategy and confrontational advocacy approach by community, Mother Nature, and activist group. In this case, it is undeniable that media outlet, social media, has played a critical role in pushing the government to postpone the dam project. Third, Mother Nature has produced creative video and digital content to promote the campaign on social media, especially on Facebook. So the campaigns become more viral on social media, especially Facebook, and receive higher attention from the public and decision maker. Furthermore, the campaign against the dam project has less involvement from formal and big NGO. However, informal groups like Mother Nature, Mang Network, and activist groups, student groups show their strong support to the advocacy of community on the ground. More importantly, the political context enabled community and youth activists to do the roadblock for 6 months and run the campaign. And during the time, the political power of the opposition party still has strong voice, both inside the National Assembly and outside. Based on my personal experience and observation, it revealed that many opposition supporters, including the supporter of the ruling party, they also support the campaign against the dam project, and they don't want to see the dam exist in Arang. Finally, the government has not yet scrutinized and restrict freedom of expression on the internet as today. Therefore, social media users had online freedom to express their view and criticize the dam project.
We'd just like to finish with a few key points about the contribution to the literature. So first, we hope we've illustrated that civil society is a lot more dynamic and complex than a lot of the analysis that exists on Cambodian civil society. There are significant degrees of informal civil society. A lot of actors are asserting agency in different ways. And there really is strong examples of this willingness to confront issues, particularly such as the roadblock in the Arang Valley. We also think it's really important that this contestation between international actors or more formal actors often taking technical approaches towards challenging hydropower hegemony, of how well placed that is when you see the success in Arang was far less about the technical approach and much more about this broader ideology and challenging hydropower hegemony on an ideological basis, and also this willingness to take confrontational approaches in the case of the roadblock. As Mory has also highlighted, it is really important the broader political context and how that influences the closing and opening of political space and these various tensions. And we think all of this will become much more prescient as the Sustainable Development Agenda has the potential to push hydropower hegemony further and further. So I think it's a space to watch in the future. And on that note, thank you for listening, and we look forward to the discussion.